Welcome to the Song Revolution,
inspiring you to dive deeper into your songwriting and creativity
to reach the world with the message of Jesus.
Here's your host, John Chisum.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of the Song Revolution with me, John Chisum, president of Nashville Christian Songwriters. I'm here in the NCS studio with our intro co-host, Tina Keil. Tina, good morning.
Good morning, John.
Just so everybody knows, we are 6 feet apart.
Yes, we are.
Here, and I have Lysol'd everything, so you're safe, I'm safe. No hugs this morning.
No
it was
hugs. Oh,
kind of disappointing, isn't it?
always disappointing.
Our hearts go out to everyone, especially those who are alone, the elderly or singles or anyone who hasn't had a hug recently. So,
Yes.
Tina, let's send some virtual hugs out there.
Oh man, I've got so many. I mean, I'm gonna hug and kiss everybody so tight when this is all over. Sincerely,
You're storing them up.
Just kind of stay away from me if you don't want to be attacked with hugs.
You know, I just have this vision of us roaring back. You know, the economy, love, humanity, all kinds of results of this. It's so insane and freaky, and we're going to talk on this podcast. We've actually been on a little bit of a hiatus from releasing podcast because we're on the verge of making an announcement that is going to impact. We've been retooling the show, and we're on the verge of a huge announcement that's going to be mind-blowing for our listeners, which we're so excited about. But we've just taken a break for a while. But in a conversation a few days ago, Tina, it just seemed to rise up in our hearts. Our families are close. We live close, and it just kind of rose up in our hearts to do kind of a ministry show today.
Yes, just encourage and love on, and hopefully just inspire in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just elevate everyone in one way.
Well, even my wife exclaimed, yes, when we talked about doing a show just around hope and trying to encourage people. And the whole point is for us to pull together to bring hope and encouragement in this devastating time. And if I don't know what time period anyone might be listening to this in the future, but at this point, we're just beginning to see we're not at the crest of the cases and the actual deaths here in the United States, and our hearts certainly go out to Italy and to China and the other countries that are dealing with this. The whole world is dealing with this. So our hearts and our prayers certainly go out. Now you are a very ministry-oriented person. You have a long history of music and worship and songwriting and recording. And you're just a naturally nurturing person. You have a very high woo factor. Tell everybody what woo is.
According to a personality test, Strength Finders 2.0, woo is winning others over, of which I never try to do on purpose, but I'm tested high in that, and
Well, you don't have to try, right? It's just who you are.
I don't have to try. I love people easily. Yeah. I love hearing their stories. I genuinely. My husband once said, he said, Tina, why do you ask me every day how my day is? And I'm like, because I really want to know.
Exactly.
And I want to know all the details of it, because, like, for real.
It just exudes from you, and people are so naturally drawn to you. So I think it was just a natural that we'd do a show today. And I have a bit of an outline for us. We're going to be kind of casual about this, you guys listening. This is just going to be casual. This is us just coming to you, visiting with you, encouraging you as we encourage ourselves through this time. So, Tina, I thought it would be fun if we talked a little bit today about finding the hidden gifts in crisis, the hidden gifts during a time of massive life change when the world as we know it has been so interrupted and shut down. And yet we are still in God's hands. We are still here because of His plan. We're still here in His sovereign will. Revelation 4:11 has been kind of a key for me, and it's the one that's I'm going to misquote it a little bit, you guys, but it's, in the old King James, which was my first version of the Bible, it said, "Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive honor and glory and power, for you've created all things, and by all things exist basically because of him," right? We live, we are a being here on this planet because of his will, and for thy pleasure they were created. You remember that old song,
Yeah.
Thou art worthy?
I do.
You remember that? Thou art worthy. I'm in such terrible voice. Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory, glory and honor. Glory. Is it glory and honor?
I thought it was
Thou art worthy, O Lord. And it's the second part.
Oh my gosh, we pulled that out.
I know, I can't. I know. It was and for thy pleasure they were created. Is that it? Right?
We're close. We're close. I mean, we're talking about spontaneity.
I know, right? Man, I did brush my teeth, but I didn't warm up my voice this morning.
We're far enough away.
We are.
There's no spit being shared here.
No, none at all. But I mean, that song and that scripture really points out that we're here by God's sovereign hand, and this is not a surprise to him. Right. I don't care what your theology is. People have all kinds of theology around all this, judgment and all that. But, the fact is we're dealing with it. This is a broken, fallen world, and I don't believe God caused it. But I believe this is a great opportunity for us to respond and to respond with faith, to respond with hope, to respond with love and care for our fellow human beings. And I think that's what we're seeing all over the internet and TV and all that. So I was just hoping we could talk a little bit about the hidden gifts and maybe unpack that just a little bit and bring some encouragement to our listeners as songwriters, and that's primarily our audience. And so I wanted to start with time, because I have conducted over 1,600 potential songwriter client calls, because we offer 8-week coaching groups and one-on-one type thing. And one of the objections or the questions I hear often is, well, I just don't have time. And yet people want to step into a higher level of expressing themselves, and it takes time. So, here we find that some people have a lot of time and on their hands now that they didn't, and maybe they are working at home more, or maybe just life has changed and they've been furloughed or laid off. Exactly. And I think one of the challenges, is finding, maybe I don't want to jump too far ahead of ourselves, but it's kind of a mixed blessing, isn't it, Tina? It's like you've got time, but now we have major stress and fear and anxiety and worry. So how do you manage this stuff?
Most of the people that I've talked to through especially over the last couple of weeks, their emotions are up and down. Mm-hmm. I mean, even all in one day, they're feeling a little anxiety, they're feeling a little fear, and yet, they're trying to take hold of that and go, okay, but look, I've been given, this opportunity to do these things or spend extra time with my family, or, my master closet got cleaned out, which is a real gift for me, right?
Yeah, my wife's out painting in the garage right now.
So that was something that was, it's been on a to-do list for a super long time, and I'm so glad to have, scratched it off. But, so yes, there's so many gifts in this time, and yet so many fears and challenges as well. Personally, I'm working crazy hard to stay on the positive side of this. I have felt my share of anxiety as well, but I just keep going back to, okay, but here we are today. Yesterday's gone. Yeah. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet, right? But I have today, and this is my reality today. Mm-hmm. These things are my reality. So what am I going to do with today?
I think that's really true. Staying present, staying in the moment. I was mentioning before we started recording the show this morning that I saw a meme yesterday on Instagram or Facebook, and I can't quote it exactly, but the gist of it was the original meme said, if you don't emerge from this crisis not having learned a language, not having started your side hustle, not having, massively improved your life, then basically it was kind of a little bit shaming, right?
Yeah.
And so the person had crossed out some of those things and responded like, hey, that's a shaming message and doesn't really apply to everyone, right? I mean, think of the elderly. They're not interested in a side hustle or, right? I mean, we're kind of thrown into survival on a lot of levels.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. And I think about the elderly. I actually have a grandmother in a nursing home.
103 years old.
103 years old. And my mom and my aunt care for her daily.
And they're in their 80s, right?
My mom's in her 70s, but they're actually both in their 70s.
Oh, okay.
But the bottom line is they're not present to see,
exactly, right?
See her, touch her, hold her hand. That's so hard to just not be able to just even touch her hand, right?
Yeah.
And just know that someone is there. So I think about that. I think about single people who are living alone, right? Who haven't had a physical hug. You just mentioned that a little bit ago, John. And or people who are their world is, you were talking about time, right? And the gift of time that some of us have been given, but there's a whole nother demographic who are not experiencing that at all, because you have maybe a household where everybody in the household has full-time jobs, and now you have to work full-time from home. And now you have children at home who are trying to do homework. They're out of their routine. Everybody's out of their routine, and it feels like
chaos, turmoil.
Right. You're covered in that. So what do you do with all of that?
Extra challenges for songwriters in that situation. Exactly. Maybe a mom who was used to hubby leaving the house, right? And kids going off to school. And now she's lost her time. She has lost her time. Right. So I think there are two sides to that coin, to that situation, because there may be, like we just said earlier, single people or people that are, maybe they're empty nesters like we are, and they find themselves, they're not working full time, or they've been furloughed or laid off. Exactly. And so they've got this time. How could you imagine them taking advantage of that from a songwriting standpoint? And you're a songwriter, so how could you imagine someone in that situation? Let's go to the positive side of things.
Right. Absolutely.
How can you maybe lay aside some of the stress and anxiety to dig into this time we have?
I think if you're feeling overwhelmed and chaos is everywhere you look, inside your home, right?
Right.
I think maybe an idea would be to keep a tablet nearby, and all these emotions that you're feeling, you jot those things down, so that when normalcy comes back to you and you can, grab an hour to write that song, you can go back and look at those notes and access all those feelings and tap into that and write about that, pour your heart out about that. Or, so you may not have the time to actually sit down and craft a song, but there are so many emotions flying around.
Right. Oh my gosh.
So many emotions that you're personally experiencing, or your family's experiencing, or you're, hearing from loved ones that can be tapped in and written about.
So maybe this would be a time to pick back up on your journaling.
Yes.
Pick back up on really capturing, like you were saying, those thoughts. One thing that we recommend to songwriters, whether we're in a time of crisis or not, is to journal. And if you do have a song idea that you're struggling with trying to nail down, right? You want to write about something specific, but you don't quite know how to get to it. We recommend you sit down and just write some pages around your feelings around those ideas. So I think this could be a really great time to do exactly what you're saying, and to spend time thinking through what could minister to people. Because as Christian songwriters, we are certainly expressing the truth of the gospel, but we're also responding to the times. There's a verse, you'll remember the verse. I don't remember the address of it, but it was talking about the men of Issachar, whoever they were, that knew the times, right? They had wisdom. Right. And I think that there is wisdom in this time. And if someone is listening, now to us, and you've got time on your hands, pray and ask God, what are the best acts of stewardship? How can I best steward this time? And for me, I think that's what this comes back to, because God's still here. He hasn't revoked the gospel. He hasn't revoked his love or his spirit or his graces. We have enough grace for right now, even if it's freaky, if it's scary, even if we don't think we're tapped into it, right? Right. But there's grace to steward well. And I think that's about that meme, right? Yeah. It's not about shaming, but it's about being wise like the men of Issachar, knowing the times and finding these hidden gems, right? Even in a time of chaos and trouble.
And sometimes that can be as simple as just being aware, being observant.
Exactly, right?
Listening.
Paying attention.
Just paying attention to how people are feeling, how you're feeling. I mean, it's just so much easier to tap in and write about those things when you first, you connect.
I know, right?
Right? To what mankind is feeling.
Well, that's totally it,
what
right?
your neighborhood is feeling, what your, how everybody is feeling in your household.
Really becoming more observant and taking this time to get out of a fantasy about becoming a famous songwriter and just writing something that's going to minister to the people around you. And, with the internet, I've said this for the last several years, we're living in the best of times for Christian songwriters, people who want to communicate the message of hope like never before.
That's right.
And the issue is that mediocrity isn't going to rise above millions of songs being released. Tina, I read last year, it might even be different now, it probably is, but every half hour, over 18,000 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube. Every half hour. And that was last year's statistic. Wow. With everybody home, who knows what it is now. But for Christian songwriters, the challenge that I've seen is that if you just write at a very basic level, you're not going to stand out. So what we do in our training is try to help people write very clearly, very effectively, very powerfully, to capture the anointing, to capture that message of hope, that seed of hope in the clearest, most effective way, so that it can stand out. I mean, my goodness, we're floating in a sea of mediocrity of songs and all kinds of communication because it is so accessible. It is so easy. And people are being, I think, picky and you're not going to be heard at the level you want if you don't get the skills. But
for those of you who have truly been given the gift of time in this season, like you have hours that you can sit down and write and craft.
What a gift.
You've prayed for a moment like this, maybe not like this, but you get the point of, okay, for whatever reason, I have the time. Wow, the opportunity that you have to really sit down and quiet yourself and tap into, all the things that you've dreamt about.
I know, before, right? You feel it, so now increase your skill level. So I think that might lead us into the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is really prioritizing our time, and instead of just being glued to the TV. In fact, I heard it was either yesterday or this morning, even the people on TV were recommending that you don't get addicted to it and you spend no more than 30 minutes a day getting updated. I mean, I want to get an update in the morning, sometimes in the evening, just to kind of see and to continue to pray. But, I think that we can find different priorities, in our lives. As we're even sitting here talking out the window, I'm seeing little families go by on the sidewalk that I haven't seen in the whole year that we've actually lived in this neighborhood. And more people are out, more families are together, and that can be good or bad, right? Yeah. But prioritizing being that good steward we were just talking about in relationships and maybe even our spiritual lives and our prayer time and just kind of realigning our priorities while we are in this quarantine.
You know, I am imagining some of you, because I've heard this as well from friends, that you've got all this time, right? So you're out of your routine and you're just like out of sync. And so rather than prioritizing and really being intentional about this time gift that you've been given, you feel like you're kind of flailing. John, how would you encourage people to kind of rein that in and go, okay, I'm out of routine. I'm feeling kind of lost, but this is what I'm going to do about it.
Well, we're all having to reprioritize our lives. It's changed how we go to the grocery store. It's changed, how much toilet paper we buy. It's changed, right? It's just
John's
changed.
paying me for this podcast with toilet paper, by the way. No, I'm joking.
You get 4 rolls if we go 30 minutes, but no, seriously. But it is reprioritizing life and as we know it on the planet. So on an individual level, I think that if we truly believe God wants us to communicate through songs, we can find 30 minutes a day. We can make that a priority to journal. And like you said, you don't have to write a full-blown song every day, but at least take a few minutes to journal, to write, to think, and also just to observe and capture those ideas. I think that's just tremendous advice for right this moment. Don't try to do full-blown thing. I mean, if you got a home studio and you can do that, that's cool. More time in the studio. But, I'm going to branch us out here just a little bit because someone sent me a quote yesterday. I believe that our global priorities are not just being challenged, they're being altered forever. What governments are dealing with now, just the survival of our species as we've known it, as well as working together as a planet and our nations. But also, I'm going to bring it down. Tina, you and I have served in the local church for decades. You've been a full-time worship pastor. I've been a pastor. And someone sent me this quote yesterday, and I'm just going to pull it out. This is a little off topic in some ways, except for the fact that music and worship, I think, are going to change. And I think we're going to see some things happen. So let me read this quote. We've commercialized the ministry. This trend has seen its best days, I hope, and will eventually give way to authenticity again, but probably not until major shifts have taken place that call the church to seek the presence of God in sincerity from a heart level again. What do you think about that?
I was just really trying to listen and grasp and feel the depth of that. I don't see how this season cannot change us. I'm prayerful and hopeful that just loving mankind, just opening the doors for each other, just simple kindnesses, right? I hope that's reestablished. I hope that the bickering between the parties and there's so much division. There has been, and yet I've seen so much kindness in people who, I don't know. It's been amazing to me, the different stories that have come out, things that things that are even just happening in our community. John, we live in the same neighborhood, and the things that just our neighbors are doing. It's just amazing. I've lived in this community for 14 years. I've never seen what I've seen in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah. We all went out on our porch the other night and prayed the Lord's Prayer.
We sure did.
It wasn't everybody on our street, of course, but it was quite a few people.
Everyone was invited, but come out on the porch, and then John and I are discussing pop-up worship around we have a lake in the community, and how are we going to facilitate that? And there's all sorts of things going on.
But these kinds of crises, in global crisis. It can happen in a community. It can happen, in a state or region or nationally. Well, this is global, right?
It is.
It's gonna change us forever. And I'm really hoping that it does change the way that we even approach church and worship. And I'm gonna give you a little clue, okay?
I was gonna say that was not gonna be my question.
Oh, I didn't tell you who said that. I wrote that 4 years ago in my training modules for Christian songwriting.
John Chisum.
And somebody sent that to me, and I'm going, oh my gosh, who said this? And then he said, you did. And it was like, oh my goodness. He said, you might turn out to be the prophet after all. But, I don't even remember writing that. And sometimes, kind of that prophetic thing can sort of be like that. I don't claim to be a prophet at all, but I think it's my hope and my dream that some of the showiness, I'm just going to put myself out there because I've been part of it too in the past, but I've certainly changed the way I think about a lot of things in these last 5 years. But, I think it's time for the church to rise up in authentic love for everyone. I not that any believing person did this, but I read and heard on the news just in the last day about an Asian woman who was attacked because people were it was a hate crime for the fact that this virus started in China, and she was attacked. And it's like, this type of thing brings out the best and the worst in people. And my heart actually goes out for the families who are dealing with dad's not ever home this much, and now he's, there's domestic violence and all the stuff. It's just, it brings out the best and the worst. And I believe it's time for us as Christian songwriters to realize that we are called upon to write something besides the same old, aren't we all happy in Jesus, when there's a world that's hurting out there. We need more than that.
It's crushing to hear of all the lives lost in this pandemic. I mean, it's crushing.
Well, let's don't go there again.
But there's so much hope.
There is. Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that it's there, though. It is a real thing. But songwriters can speak to it.
Amen. Right.
And encourage and bring hope. When things feel so uncertain and so dark. And
that's always been the job of poets and prophets and artists and writers and people to really bring that in an artistic ways, that communicate, that kind of bypass the brain and kind of go straight to the heart. So let's use that to transition to the third thing that I'd like to talk about, and that is really digging deeper into creativity in some specific ways that works for me, because we do a lot of business, right? We're Nashville Christian songwriters. We exist to empower Christian songwriters worldwide. We know that our podcast has reached 165 countries. We know that. Our little marketing guy is so fun, Tina, because he pulls up this Google map or something, Google Analytics map, and he can actually mouse over a map of the entire world, and the little countries light up where someone has accessed our podcast or come to our website or something.
I love that.
It's so fun,
Yeah, it's so great.
I didn't even know. Okay, so I'm going to true confessions here, full disclosure. I didn't even know how many countries there were in the world until he did this.
Right,
and so there's like somewhere around 205, 206 countries. I think I would have thought there would be like 800 or 1,000 or something, but there's only like 205. And so on his little map, he can show that about 165 countries have tuned in to the message of hope that we bring to encourage songwriters
worldwide.
to fulfill their
it.
cause. So it's really fun.
Yeah.
And I love seeing that. And my point is that we spend a lot of time reaching those people. I'm spending a lot of time marketing. We're creating all kinds of resources, and we're on Facebook, and we're on song discovery calls. We're creating all this stuff. And so sometimes when it comes to my own songwriting, which I'm a lifelong songwriter, I can't help it.
Absolutely, sure.
So a lot of times I've turned down co-writing with really wonderful people who have hundreds, if not thousands, of songs recorded. I turned down the opportunity to write because I'm kind of empty by the time I get to the writing session,
Right.
you know, and I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to waste my time. And I don't want to walk into a room with, you know, Kenna Turner West from Curb Word Entertainment. This woman is amazing. Hey, Kenna, if you ever listen to this, she is a full-time professional songwriter. She literally has had, I know she's had 40 number one songs, and I know she's had hundreds recorded. She's a dear friend. And I don't want to walk into a co-write with Kenna and sit there like a mushroom when it's like, you know, she has to carry the whole session. You know, I want to be filled. I want to be filled with creativity. And so, you know, what fills your creative bucket? And I've got some things that work for me, but what fills your creativity?
Well, you know, this is going to sound so simple, but I love a delicious smelling candle.
Oh, wow.
And a beautiful view. And that could be a park setting. That could be, you know, I have some spaces in my house that just bring joy to me, you know, and clean, good smells, good view.
What
those
scent?
Those things are just, I know it's simple.
Pine
It sounds so simple, but it honestly makes a difference in me. It makes a difference. And then I'm careful to what I listen to. When I need creativity and inspiration, I'm not listening to sad songs. I'm not, you know, I'm listening to hope. I'm listening to things that fill my bucket. And then I love encouraging other people. That fills me.
You do. Yeah, you do that so well.
And then I can sit down and I feel alive, you know?
Yeah, kind of moving in your gifts, right?
It is.
So I love the fact that you mentioned space, creative space. And I think that's a great way to start that conversation, because even if you have to go into the bathroom and get in the tub with a candle and, you know, whatever, you know, or whatever, just to kind of get into physical space. And, you know, I think that's very biblical because it's sanctuary. You know, and we certainly have an inner sanctuary that we can kind of go to through meditation and prayer. And that's what worship really does. You know, worship, singing songs and the worship is so much more than just singing songs. It's actually, from a scriptural standpoint, it's preaching the gospel is worship.
It is.
Preaching in general, you know, teaching the word is worship. Prayer, of course, is worship. Giving is worship.
It is.
So serving is worship. So all those things, you know, can be that. But, you know, we think about mostly just standing there singing, but that takes us to that sanctuary. That makes us aware of the never ending, the ceaseless presence of God within us. And so Jesus said the kingdom of God is within.
I think about that,
right?
John. I think, okay, well, that's a given for me, right? I just think about the practicalities of, you know, other things that drive me to creativity. But yes, of course.
So creating sanctuary, even in your, if you have to go to the closet, the prayer closet, to find that place of sanctuary. Anything else? Does anything else bring that out in you? I got my go-tos, but
what do you do? What do you do?
You know what? Reading. I'm just so word oriented and reading the scriptures, of course. I'm reading Integrity Music put out a worship Bible many years ago, and it's got some tremendous devotionals in it. So I've been reading that lately. That's been very, very encouraging. But listening to audible.com, I wish I'd taken out stock in those guys, because I preach endlessly that anyone serious about their songwriting needs to be a lover of words. And so when I listen to books, I listen to a lot of I listen to nonfiction. I think you're a nonfiction lover too. My wife loves fiction, and I don't know, I just haven't quite gotten into it, but I listen to a lot of devotional writers, people that I just go back to again and again and again, and listening and reading, because I see the words and then I hear the sound of the words, you know. And I was listening to a sermon my daughter sent me from her church, which is the Gathering in St. Louis, and Pastor Evie, and she was talking about different facets of the cross, and it was brilliant sermon. Maybe we can put it in the show notes. It really encouraged me because, she said that the cross is like a prism, and depending on where you're standing and how you're looking at it, it shines different facets of light, and it looks different at all kinds of angles,
Yes.
right? And so she was talking about how we've had the retributive view of salvation, which we kind of all grew up with this, that Jesus is the substitution, sacrifice for our sins and that type of thing, which is awesome. She brought out a different facet of that, and that is that the cross satisfied the love of God and not just the wrath of God.
Yes.
And it was a brilliant idea, right?
Yes.
And so I mean, that's the kind of thing that I keep up with. I write that down. Right? I make a note of that, right? So that I can come back to that later on. So it's the sound of the words. That's my whole point, is that, and I don't know if I'll get that in a song or not, but the crucifixion satisfied somehow the love of God. And we say it demonstrated, but her word satisfied, that's just kind of a turn on it, right?
Right, it is.
And so as a songwriter, I'm listening for those phrases. I was in my car and I thought of a phrase and then I forgot it because I couldn't write it down.
I keep my voice memo close by.
I know.
I have so many voice memos that are just little song starts. That's what I title it, song start.
So it really is about the words and the sound of words.
Yeah.
And so whether you're binging on Netflix, you can still listen to the sounds of words. You can, if you, whatever you're watching or listening, I think the whole point for songwriters is to be creative during these times, to use your time, to prioritize your time, to be creative with your time. So
whatever that looks like.
Exactly.
For you.
Exactly.
Don't beat yourself up in any way.
Totally.
Just, it is what it is. So how can you make good use of it and maximize that?
So we're trying to do that here at NCS. And so a week ago, we did what we call, it's the second time we've done Free Critique Week. And what we did, we put it out to all of our social media, our mailing list.
Right.
And every day at noon, this was week before last, we went on for an hour and we demonstrated what professional level song critique.
And what great success.
It was so fun. So
yes.
We've decided to do that again this week for our NCS members, kind of an exclusive thing for them. And we're going to go on and we're going to critique 2 songs a day for our members all week at 11 a.m. Central all week. If you're hearing this in time, if you're not an NCS member, it's easy. Just jump over to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. You can join for as little as $14.99 a month. And we do a monthly masterclass where we talk about creativity. We talk about what commercial songwriting is, modern chord progressions for writing worship songs. And it's just an amazing community of dedicated Christian songwriters from all over the world. And so it just, if you're listening, I want to invite you to join today. If you're not an NCS member, just go to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. And Tina, I've launched a brand new homepage that I am aching for the world to see. I'm so excited about it.
When are you going to release it?
It's there. It's out now.
It's out.
Yeah. It's so cool.
I missed it.
So you got to go look.
Absolutely,
right?
I will.
So if you're going to be on my show, you got to know the homepage. But anyway, so you guys jump over to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com, join membership. You can still get in on Free Critique Week all week long. And then we'll do it again. We do these things for our songwriters to try to resource and encourage. And gosh, we're all so sad about this time, but we're seeing our community level increase. People are jumping in, they're participating. We've had record numbers of people online for Free Critique Week a week ago, and I know we're going to see that again this week. Well, Tina, thank you so much for being with us
John,
today.
It's always such a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, gosh. I knew that if we got together, your woo factor would come out and you would... and just your nurturing, loving, your heart. So thank you for being a great part of our show today. And we certainly wish you and your family health and safety. And again, everybody, if you're just tuning in a little bit later, Tina is in the studio, but we are 6 feet apart. And I've got the Lysol can right behind me. So we will be releasing more podcasts here in the future. We have about 142 podcast episodes in the library here at Song Revolution with John Chisum. So I hope that you'll be taking advantage of that, during this time that we're locked down in quarantine. And very soon we're going to have a wonderful new announcement, and you're going to see a totally redesigned, re-released version of Song Revolution. So you guys have a great week. Tina, thanks again.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to the Song Revolution podcast, designed to help you live a more inspired and meaningful life.
Subscribe now and share this podcast with the creatives in your circle.
You can connect with John Chisum on Facebook or
visit NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com to take your songwriting to the next level.